She said no jury would ever convict her, but what unfolded in the courtroom left everyone stunned. Today's case includes a beautiful woman, a brutally murdered man, and a crime scene soaked in betrayal, sex, and blood. This is the shocking story of Travis Alexander and Jodi Arias, America's most infamous femme fatale. On a blistering hot Arizona summer day, there was a gruesome discovery in a quiet Mesa neighborhood that sent shockwaves through the community. Friends who entered Travis Alexander's house on June 9, 2008, found the 30-year-old motivational speaker dead in his shower, and he had clearly been the victim of a brutal killing. His friends were horrified at what they saw. He had been stabbed dozens of times. His throat was slashed open, and he had been shot in the head. All of us that consume a lot of true crime are probably thinking the same thing right now. This is clearly overkill. Suspicion very quickly turned towards Travis's ex-girlfriend, a 28-year-old aspiring photographer named Jodi Arias. In the investigation and trial that followed, the public would learn of a tumultuous relationship fueled by passion and jealousy, including salacious details of sex and religion and the cold-blooded violence that ended Travis Alexander's life. Jodi Arias would go on to become one of America's most accused murderers, a young woman who insisted she killed in self-defense, while prosecutors argued that it was actually a premeditated jealous rage. What unfolded was a true crime story that captivated TV viewers like myself with each and every new twist that came. Between Jodi Arias' changing stories, her countless days on the witness stand, and a media circus, nobody could believe how this all played out. Welcome to the True Crime Nurse, everybody. My name is Kat, and I'm a registered nurse who loves all things nursing and true crime. Today's case was the first case that I actually ever watched live on TV, so this video was one that I wanted to cover. Really quick before we continue on though, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment down below any cases that you want me to look into, and let me know if you watched this trial on TV or what the first trial was that you actually watched live, because I'm very curious. Jodi Ann Arias was born on July 9, 1980, in Salinas, California, to her parents William and Sandra Arias. She grew up in a middle-class household as one of 4 children. According to Jodi, her childhood was not an easy one. She claimed that from the age of 7 onward, she suffered abuse at the hands of her parents, alleging that she was beaten with a belt and wooden spoons. None of her claims were corroborated, but they became a part of Arias' narrative about her life during that time. In school, Arias was described as artistic and quiet. She developed a passion for photography as a teenager and carried a camera with her everywhere that she went. However, Arias' education stopped in high school. She attended Wairika High School in Northern California all the way up until 11th grade, but then she dropped out right before her senior year. But as a young adult without a diploma, Arias drifted between jobs and cities in search of some direction. After leaving high school, Arias immediately began working to support her newfound independence. She moved out of her parents' home and worked different odd jobs, including waitressing and being a professional photographer. In 2001, she landed a job as a server at the Ventana Inn, which is in Big Sur, California. There, 21-year-old Jodi struck up a romance with the restaurant's food and beverage manager, Daryl Brewer, who was in his 40s. They fell madly in love, and this was Jodi's first real long-term relationship. Arias moved in with Brewer and his young son, and the couple lived together in Monterey County's scenic Big Sur area between 2002 and 2006. During these years, though, Arias learned to adapt to a more domestic life, helping to care for Brewer's child and continuing to work on her photography hobby. Brewer would later describe Arias during their years together as caring and peaceful, something that would definitely be used later on in the trial. But by 2006, the relationship had run its course. Arias and Brewer parted ways as Arias entered into a new chapter that would change the entire trajectory of her life. In September 2006, shortly after her breakup with Brewer, 26-year-old Jodi Arias was living in Palm Desert, California, and decided to try out sales for a more consistent income. She had recently begun working as a sales consultant for Prepaid Legal Services, Inc., also known as PPL, which is a network marketing company that actually sells legal insurance plans. That month, Arias decided to attend a PPL convention in Las Vegas, Nevada, and this decision would change everything. It was at a hotel ballroom in Las Vegas where there were motivational speeches and sales workshops, and this is when Jodi met Travis Alexander. Travis was a 29-year-old superstar salesman and motivational speaker for PPL, which was based out of Mesa, Arizona at that time. Charismatic and devout in his Mormon faith, Travis had overcome a difficult childhood of his own. He was born on July 28, 1977 in Riverside, California, into a really troubled family and was actually taken in by his grandparents as a little boy. By 2006, he was a successful businessman with an active social circle in the LDS or Latter-day Saint Church. When Travis and Jodi crossed paths at the September 2006 PPL conference, the attraction was immediate. Friends would later say that the chemistry between them was potent and obvious. Travis was taken by Jodi's striking blonde hair, looks, and bubbly personality, and she in turn was charmed with his humor and his warmth. A friend of Travis named Sky Hughes said, quote, "She's beautiful, she's friendly, she seemed to like him just as much as he liked her," end quote. A whirlwind long-distance romance began pretty quickly after meeting. Arias lived in Southern California and Alexander was still in Arizona, but they kept in constant contact by phone and email and visited each other as often as they could. In November 2006, just 2 months after meeting, Jodi demonstrated her commitment to Travis by converting to Travis's faith. On November 26, 2006, Travis personally baptized Jodi into the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in a ceremony in Southern California. Converting for someone rather than for yourself, to me, is an immediate red flag, but let me know how you guys feel in the comments down below. By February 2007, the pair had decided to call each other boyfriend and girlfriend, which is wild if you think about it, because that means that she got baptized for him prior to even being official. But despite the distance, they were smitten with each other. Travis spoke to his friends about how he actually thought that Jodi could be the one, at one point telling his friends that he thought that he found his wife in Jodi. She felt the exact same way. Jodi relocated from California to Mesa, Arizona in mid-2007 to be closer to Travis. She moved into an apartment about 10 minutes from Travis's house and even found work cleaning homes, including Travis's, to earn extra money while staying near him. Beneath the surface of their passionate romance, there were serious problems, though. The relationship between them was intensely physical and emotional, but also increasingly volatile. Travis, as a devout Mormon, was very conflicted by the sexual aspects of their relationship. The two were intimate, which went against his church's teachings of chastity before marriage. According to Jodi, this led to a lot of guilt and shame, hiding this part of their relationship from everyone. To the outside world, Travis presented himself as a faithful Mormon man, which he was, while privately carrying on a steamy love affair with Jodi. They exchanged explicit texts, which I won't be sharing here because of guidelines on YouTube, but they also recorded racy conversations. In one recorded phone sex session later played in court, Travis graphically described tying Jodi to a tree and using objects to penetrate her, to which she responded, "That is so debasing. I like it." Travis's inner turmoil and double life created tension and fueled secrecy in their relationship. Not exactly the best way to start off a new relationship, if you ask me. Jealousy and mistrust also began to grow. Jodi Arias was deeply possessive of Travis. Friends observed that she often became uncomfortable if Travis even spoke casually with another woman, and she seemed to want to monopolize all of his time and his attention. Sky Hughes talked about an early incident when Jodi was eavesdropping from outside the door while Travis spoke with Sky's wife. Jodi was caught and, according to Sky, gave them an evil look with rage in her eyes. Travis's friends found Jodi's behavior deeply concerning. Sky Hughes later described warning Travis in all seriousness by saying, quote, "I'm afraid we're going to find you chopped up in her freezer," end quote. The look on Jodi's face triggered Sky's intuition, and I wish that that is where today's story ended. Travis himself confided to friends about disturbing incidents. He mentioned that Jodi hacked into his Facebook account and email, and that his car tires were mysteriously slashed on not one, but 2 separate occasions. These are incidents that he suspected Jodi was definitely behind. He also showed friends threatening emails that he believed were also coming from Jodi while they were still dating. By June of 2007, after about 5 months of dating, Travis decided to break up with Jodi in hopes of establishing a healthier, drama-free life. The formal breakup did not break their bond, though. For the next year, Jodi and Travis maintained a really toxic on-again, off-again situationship. They referred to each other as exes, but continued to sleep together and fulfill all their fantasies. I feel like this was Jodi's attempt to really maintain power over him and maybe try to reconcile. But to nobody's surprise, when Travis began to date other women, Jodi remained in the picture sometimes as a friends with benefits situation or other times showing up uninvited to events and his home. After they split, Jodi moved back to California, but distance didn't end their contact. They spoke frequently on the phone, sexted, and saw each other in person on several occasions, continuing to hook up. However, their interactions were increasingly toxic at this point. Private emails and journal entries later revealed that they fought all the time, creating that push and pull toxic pattern that we all know, usually over Travis's interests in other women. In one May 2008 text conversation, Travis called Jodi, quote, a sociopath and the worst thing that ever happened to me, end quote. During an explosive argument, these things were revealed. According to Jodi, she felt Travis was using her for sex while planning a future with someone else, and she was overcome with so much hurt and anger. This escalating tension set the stage for the tragedy that was to come. On June 4th, 2008, what should have been an ordinary day turned into a scene of horrific violence in Travis Alexander's home. In the days prior, Travis and Jodi had been in contact and agreed to meet up as Jodi was going to be passing through Arizona. Jodi had planned a road trip from California to Utah to visit a new love interest, which was another PPL colleague named Ryan Burns, and attend a work conference. According to prosecutors, Jodi took a detour on this trip to go see Travis in Mesa, showing up unannounced at his house on June 4th. Arias, however, would later claim that Travis himself invited her to stop by. Regardless of who initiated that meeting, Jodi arrived at Travis's two-story Mesa home at some point on June 4th. The pair ended up spending several hours together that afternoon, and by the end of that day, Travis would be dead. The exact sequence of events of that day have been meticulously reconstructed through forensic evidence, of course, but this also included digital camera timestamps and blood patterns at the scene. After Jodi's arrest, investigators recovered Travis's digital camera discarded in his washing machine. Miraculously, despite attempts to destroy it, police technicians were able to retrieve deleted photos from the camera's memory card. These images formed an eerie visual timeline of the crime. The photos show that around 1:40 p.m. on June 4th, Travis and Jodi were together in bed. The couple had been intimate not long after Jodi arrived. Several explicit pictures showed Jodi nude on Travis's bed and Travis also undressed, suggesting that they had had consensual sex that afternoon. Hours later, the camera's timestamps actually showed the pair in Travis's master bathroom. The final picture of Travis Alexander alive was taken approximately 5:29 p.m. on June 4th. In that image, Travis is seen in the shower looking directly at the camera with a seemingly unbothered expression and water spraying over him. Moments after that peaceful photo was taken, horror struck. The camera, likely held by Jodi, continued to take pictures as it was dropped to the floor during the struggle. Photos taken at 5:32 p.m., just seconds after the shower portrait, are chaotic and dark, but they uncover some disturbing clues. One image shows what looks to be a bleeding figure on the bathroom floor, and another shows a portion of Jodi's pant leg and foot in the acts of moving Travis's brutally injured body. In those few minutes, Travis Alexander had been attacked and overpowered by Jodi Arias, ending his life. The autopsy and crime scene evidence later showed the extent of Travis's injuries. He had been stabbed 27 times across his body with deep, penetrating knife wounds on his torso, chest, and back. Several of the stab wounds were defensive wounds on his hands and arms, indicating that Travis was fighting desperately for his life as the knife slashed at him by the woman that he thought that he loved at one point. I cannot imagine the amount of fear and betrayal that he felt during his final moments. His throat had been cut so severely that his trachea, carotid artery, and jugular vein were all sliced. The gaping neck wound was nearly ear to ear, and it was a wound so severe that it was described as almost decapitating him. And finally, he had a gunshot wound above his right brow, a .25 caliber bullet that had been fired directly into his head. Now, for a little nursing information, the human body holds about 1 to 2 gallons of blood. That's it. The injury to Travis's neck alone would have made him bleed out quickly, so the brutality of this attack was overkill and heinous beyond measure. In my opinion, the excuse of self-defense flies out the window when you think about how aggressively Travis was attacked. It went far beyond defense. The medical examiner concluded that the gunshot was likely the last injury that Travis sustained. Dr. Kevin Horn, the Maricopa County medical examiner, testified that Travis may have already been dead or near death when the bullet was fired, since there was very little blood coming from the wound. He had already lost nearly all of it. The blood evidence in the bathroom confirmed a violent struggle. Pools of blood led from the shower to the sink and down the hallway, indicating that Travis was stabbed in the shower, managed to stagger or crawl a short distance, and finally collapsed near the bathroom's hallway, where his attacker slit his throat and dragged his body back to the shower stall. Inside the home, nothing appeared stolen or disturbed except for the master bathroom area that was soaked in blood. Whoever killed Travis had clearly meant to kill him and him alone with extreme brutality. Before fleeing the scene, the perpetrator also put in a little bit of effort to clean up. Travis's body was hosed off and left crumpled in the shower, as if someone tried to wash away evidence on him. The hallway and bathroom floor had smears where someone had attempted to wipe up blood, though large stains were still intact. Travis's digital camera, which held photographic evidence of the encounter like we kind of already touched on, had been tossed in the washing machine along with bloody towels. The killer started the wash cycle, perhaps hoping to ruin the camera and any forensic traces that were inside of it, but when police later found the camera in the washer, it had been damaged by water but not destroyed. The memory card inside held the series of chilling photos that documented the crime up to the final moments of Travis's life. By the time the afternoon turned to evening on June 4th, Jodi Arias was on the road again, leaving Arizona in the rental car that she picked up 2 days prior. In the aftermath of the killing, Arias surprisingly took steps that indicated premeditation and a desire to conceal her presence in Mesa. For one, she did not call 911 or seek help for Travis in any way. Instead, evidence showed that she methodically went about covering her tracks. She deleted the incriminating photos from Travis's camera. She also took time to remove the blood-soaked socks and shoes on her. A bloody palm print was found on the wall, and it contained a mixture of Travis's blood and Jodi's DNA, indicating that she had likely cut herself during the stabbing and left that mark. But aside from that print, she also tried to leave no trace. Jodi cleaned herself up, took the bedding, some of which was later found in the washer as well, and possibly the murder weapons, being the knife and gun that were nowhere to be found at the scene, and then fled. In a calculated move, Arias also set up an alibi trail. That night and the next day, she placed several calls to Travis's phone and left cheerful voice messages, acting as if nothing was wrong. The timing of these calls, placed hours after Travis was already dead, suggested that she was trying to create the impression that she hadn't just been with him and was casually trying to reach him. It also implies, in my opinion at least, that they were on good terms by her leaving these oddly happy voicemails, which we both know is not true. They were not in a good place. Arias drove north to Utah to see Ryan Burns. When she arrived on June 5th in West Jordan, Utah, Burns noted that Jodi's long hair, which had been blonde during their last meeting, was now a dark brown color. Jodi explained that the drastic change of hair was just for fun. Burns also observed cuts on Jodi's fingers and her hands. When he asked about them, Jodi casually claimed that she had cut her hand on broken glass while working at a restaurant called Margaritaville. Plot twist, she didn't work there. It was a lie concocted to explain the wounds that she had sustained during Travis's killing. Despite these red flags, though, Ryan Burns saw nothing overtly alarming about Jodi's behavior. He later testified that she acted completely normal during her stay with him, flirting and even engaging in romantic makeouts with him over the next few days. Unknown to Burns, though, as him and Jodi were cuddling on the couch on June 5th, Travis Alexander's bloody corpse remained back in Mesa, and his friends were growing concerned over his sudden silence. Jodi left Utah on June 6th to return to her grandparents' home in Yreka, California. She had put over 2,800 miles on her rental car in a matter of days. On June 7th, 2008, Arias dropped off the rental car in Redding, California. The rental clerk would later testify that the vehicle was returned missing its floor mats, and there were noticeable red stains on the car's front and back seats. By the time police examined the car, it had already been cleaned, so the reddish stains couldn't be confirmed, unfortunately. Jodi said that they were from a spilled drink, but prosecutors implied that it may have been blood. At the rental lot, Jodi also made a point of mentioning to the employees that the car's, quote, Kool-Aid stains were there to avoid any suspicion. These details, although small at the time, later became significant evidence of a premeditated cover-up. Back in Mesa, Travis's absence had not gone unnoticed. He was supposed to leave on June 10th for a company reward trip to Cancun, Mexico, a trip that he was planning to take with a female friend from church, not Jodi. When Travis missed an important conference call on June 4th and then failed up to show for work and for church commitments in the following days, his friends knew something had to be wrong. By June 9th, 5 days after anyone had last seen Travis, a small group of his friends decided to go check on him. They knew he'd been feeling anxious about the trip, and now he wasn't answering calls or texts. That evening, they went to his house and found the doors locked and his dog Napoleon unattended inside. After finding a spare key, they entered Travis's master bedroom, and that's when they encountered an overwhelming odor and shocking scene. Blood was everywhere, in the hallway and in the bathroom. Travis's decomposing body was crumpled still in the shower. The friends called 911 in a panic, sobbing and shouting into the phone about what they had just seen. When the dispatcher asked if Travis had any enemies or if anyone might want to hurt him, the distressed friends immediately named Jodi Arias as the person of interest. One friend explained to the 911 operator that Travis had an ex-girlfriend who had been stalking him and that, quote, she's been bothering him, following him, and slashing his tires, end quote. Even in the shock of discovering their friend's murder, those who knew Travis instantly suspected Jodi. Mesa police detectives arrived at the house on June 9, 2008 to process what was now a homicide scene. From the beginning, Jodi Arias was on their radar thanks to the statements made by Travis's friends. Detective Esteban Flores of the Mesa Police Department took charge of the case. As he and forensic technicians combed through the horrific crime scene, they collected critical pieces of evidence that would soon point directly to Jodi Arias and Jodi Arias alone. In Travis's blood-spattered bathroom hallway, investigators discovered a bloody latent palm print on the wall, the one that was the mixture of both Travis and Jodi's blood. This meant that Jodi had been bleeding at the scene and left that handprint, which is an incredibly damning piece of physical evidence, placing her directly at the murder scene. Near the bloody handprint, police also found strands of long brown hair that did not belong to Travis because he had short hair. These also matched Jodi. On the floor, they recovered a spent .25 caliber shell casing, likely from the gunshot to Travis's head. And of course, there was also Travis's damaged digital camera that was still found, like I mentioned a couple times now, in the washing machine. Investigators carefully retrieved the memory card and sent it for analysis, which then led to the recovery of the infamous images that recounted those days' events and all the details leading up to the murder. Those time-stamped photos showing Jodi and Travis together just minutes before his death and images of what appeared to be Jodi dragging his body became a kingpin of this case. While forensic evidence was mounting, detectives also turned to Jodi's behavior after the crime. Not long after Travis's body was found on June 9th, news of his death spread, and it reached Jodi, who was all the way back in California. Jodi herself actually called Detective Flores upon hearing that Travis had been killed. In that June 9th call, she portrayed shock and sadness and offered to assist the investigation. She claimed that she hadn't seen Travis since their breakup long ago, and that on June 4th, she was nowhere near Arizona, but rather driving to Utah to visit friends. Jodi volunteered to submit fingerprints and questioning if needed. This preemptive cooperation was likely an attempt to put off any suspicions about her. Let me know if you guys feel like this was just as manipulative as I do in the comments down below. However, it didn't work. The evidence from the scene was too compelling. On June 19, 2008, Mesa police invited Jodi Arias to an official interview, and during this interrogation in Yreka, California, Arias calmly stuck to her story and said that she had last seen Travis in April of 2008 and had not been in Mesa on June 4th. Confronted with the fact that they had found her blood and hair at the crime scene, she pretended to be baffled. Detectives did not arrest her on that day, but they were tightening the net around Arias as the prime suspect. Investigators uncovered more signs that indicated Travis's murder was premeditated and that Jodi had meticulously planned for it. A major break was the revelation that a .25 caliber handgun had been reported stolen from the Yreka home of Jodi's grandparents, where Jodi was living, just 1 week before the killing on May 28, 2008. The timing and the weapon caliber were beyond coincidence. The murder weapon was a .25 caliber handgun, and here was a report that that same type of gun went missing from her home. Other stolen items from the alleged burglary, like cash and a stereo, were left in plain sight by the thief, while only the gun and a few small other things were taken, another red flag pointing directly at an inside job. Additionally, detectives discovered that Jodi had taken steps to conceal her road trip to Arizona. Phone records showed that on the way to Mesa, Jodi turned her phone off for 24 hours, specifically during the time that she would have been in Arizona, then turned it back on after she was well on her way to Utah. This suggested that she did not want her cell phone pinging towers in Mesa because that would have placed her near Travis's home at the time of the murder. Even more telling, Flores learned that Jodi had borrowed 2 5-gallon gas cans from her ex-boyfriend Daryl Brewer in late May of 2008. Brewer later testified that Jodi asked to borrow the gas cans for a long road trip, but she didn't explain why. Receipts showed that Jodi also purchased a 3rd gas can along with gas in Salinas, California, prior to heading to Arizona. By filling up extra cans of gasoline in California, where her purchases would not provoke suspicion, Jodi would be able to drive through Arizona without needing to stop and buy gas there, thus leaving no paper trail of her presence in Arizona. Prosecutors argued that this was clear evidence of premeditation. Arias did not want any record of her being in Arizona when Travis was killed, with the stolen gun, the turned-off phone, the borrowed gas cans, and the overwhelmingly incriminating evidence. Investigators felt that they had more than enough to make an arrest now. On July 9, 2008, Jodi Arias' 28th birthday, by the way, a grand jury in Maricopa County, Arizona, indicted her for first-degree murder of Travis Alexander. 6 days later, on July 15th, police moved in to arrest Jodi at her grandparents' home in Wairika. She did not resist, as she was handcuffed and taken into custody on the charge of Travis Alexander's murder. When Detective Flores initially told Jodi that she was being charged with killing Travis, she responded with a bizarre remark, quote, "There's no way I could have murdered Travis," she insisted. "I mean, I don't even hurt spiders." The petite, soft-spoken young woman maintained that she would never harm anyone. But within hours of her arrest, confronted with the mountain of evidence against her, Jodi's story began to shift in some astonishing ways. After her arrest, Jodi Arias was extradited from California to Arizona to face the charges. On September 11, 2008, she was arraigned in Phoenix and pleaded not guilty to the murder of Travis Alexander. At that point, Jodi was still publicly maintaining her innocence. In fact, she sought out the media to proclaim it. The day after her arraignment, Jodi gave a telephone interview to a reporter at the Arizona Republic. In that interview, she flatly denied killing Travis and said she would not hurt Travis and had no knowledge of who did. She refused to discuss any of the evidence that tied her to the crime, brushing it off, quote, as circumstantial. Then, less than 2 weeks later, Jodi Arias took her story to national TV. On September 24, 2008, while being held in jail, she granted an interview to Inside Edition. It was during this televised segment that Jodi, for the first time, changed her account of what happened to Travis. No longer claiming that she hadn't been there, Arias now admitted to Inside Edition that she was present at the scene of Travis's death, but she claimed she did not kill him. Instead, she spun a shocking new tale. According to Jodi, intruders had broken into Travis's home and attacked them both, murdering Travis and miraculously sparing her. Jodi then said the infamous phrase, quote, "No jury is going to convict me because I'm innocent and you can mark my words on that," end quote. It was a bold statement that would later haunt her. This TV appearance, with Arias looking straight into the camera and declaring her innocence, turned her case into a media sensation. Behind closed doors, investigators had already heard a version of this intruder story from Jodi a few months earlier. In the immediate aftermath of the arrest, though, during police interrogations in the summer of 2008, Arias eventually abandoned her initial claim of complete non-involvement and tried the home invasion narrative. During one lengthy July 2008 interrogation, Jodi calmly told Detective Flores that on June 4, 2008, she had indeed been at Travis's home, but that 2 masked intruders, a man and a woman, broke in and attacked Travis while she was there. She described a dramatic struggle where the unidentified assailant supposedly murdered Travis and threatened Jodi's life, but just simply let her go. Jodi claimed that she never reported this to the police because she was afraid that the intruders might seek revenge on her or, even worse, her family. This account, filled with tons of inconsistencies and lacking any evidence, was met with extreme skepticism by detectives. It also did not match the forensic evidence. There was no indication of anyone else's presence, and it didn't explain why her hair and bloody palm prints were found there with not a trace of anyone else's. Investigators were convinced that Jodi was lying, which only made them dig harder. The July 2008 interrogation videos showed Jodi Arias' remarkable composure under questioning and her flat-out strange behavior when left alone in the interrogation room. At one point, after hours of denying any role in Travis's death, Detective Flores presented Jodi with a damning piece of evidence. Nude photographs from the recovered camera showing Jodi in Travis's bed on June 4th and the haunting last image of Travis alive in the shower. Confronted by these pictures that placed her directly at the scene, Jodi paused and quietly said, "Well, it looks like me," but she claimed to have no memory of being there at that time. Was this an attempt at pleading insanity or something? Let me know if you think so too. But as the detective continued pressing her, Jodi's response became, quote, "I didn't do it." When Flores stepped out of the room, leaving Jodi alone with the camera still recording, Jodi's behavior turned erratic. Unaware, or maybe unconcerned that she was being filmed, Jodi did a series of yoga-like stretches, then shockingly lifted herself into a headstand against the wall, balancing upside down on her hands for several seconds. Later then, she sat back down and began humming a tune which grew into a soft singing of the Christmas carol "O Holy Night" to herself. She even rifled through trash and tried to fix her hair. These bizarre antics, singing carols and performing gymnastics in a homicide interrogation room, gave the public a glimpse of Jodi's psyche. I remember seeing these clips and thinking she is either completely out of touch with reality or she feels she's innocent because her behavior is just so odd. Detective Flores said that when he returned to the room, Jodi, noticing her reflection, even asked if she could freshen up her makeup before taking her mugshot. Can you believe that? Arias' mugshot from that night shows her with a soft smile on her face and touched up makeup. Despite her unlikely intruder alibi, Jodi stuck with this story for the next 2 years while awaiting trial. During 2009, as prosecutors declared their intent to seek the death penalty against Jodi, her defense team prepared for a battle. Then, in 2010, Arias shifted her course yet again. In a pretrial hearing in August of 2010, Jodi Arias officially changed her story for a third time, now claiming that Travis Alexander's death was a case of self-defense. By 2011, the defense revealed far more than just their strategy. They alleged that Travis had been emotionally and physically violent towards Jodi, and that on June 4th, 2008, he attacked her in a sudden rage, forcing her to fight for her life. Jodi Arias' murder trial began in early January 2013, nearly 5 years after Travis's death. The proceedings took place in Maricopa County Superior Court in Phoenix, presided by Judge Sherry Stevens. From the very start, the trial was a media circus. The court initially attempted to limit media coverage. At one point, Judge Stevens even allowed a defense witness to testify in secret to avoid the glare of publicity. But a 3-judge panel from the Arizona Court of Appeals overturned any moves towards secrecy, ruling that the trial should remain open to the public. Cameras were going to be allowed in the courtroom. Opening statements began on January 2, 2013. Prosecutor Juan Martinez, a veteran deputy county attorney known for his aggressive style, laid out the state's theory in stark terms. He portrayed Jodi Arias as a jealous ex-lover who could not let Travis go. Martinez described Travis Alexander as a good man who tried to move on with his life and date other women, only to be stalked and ultimately killed by Arias in a premeditated attack fueled by jealousy. He promised the jury that evidence would show Arias planned Travis's murder, that she armed herself with a stolen gun, used gas cans to conceal her travel, and brutally attacked Travis when he was most vulnerable, in the shower. In contrast, defense attorney Kirk Nurmi painted a very different picture in his opening statements. He acknowledged that Jodi Arias had killed Travis Alexander, but told the jury that it was not murder at all, it was self-defense. Nurmi argued that Travis had a darker side behind closed doors. He was sexually coercive and physically violent towards Jodi, and on June 4, 2008, he became enraged at Jodi over a drop camera, lunging at her in a violent outburst. The defense stated, quote, Jodi had to defend herself, end quote, urging jurors to see Travis not as an innocent victim, but as an aggressor towards Jodi. After these statements, the prosecution phase commenced. Juan Martinez called a parade of witnesses and presented tons of evidence over the course of January 2013. Travis's close friends took the stand, and they spoke of Travis's character and of their immediate suspicion of Jodi after his death. One friend tearfully recounted finding his body. Several Mesa police officers and forensic experts actually testified about the forensic findings. The blood analysis, the DNA match confirming the palm print, the strands of Jodi's hair discovered at the scene, and the recovered photos from the camera showing Jodi was present during the killing. These photos were shown to the jury, including the graphic images of Travis's bloody body on the floor. Jurors audibly gasped when seeing a picture of Travis's slit throat. Even Jodi Arias, who mostly maintained a stoic demeanor, appeared shaken and cried as the gruesome images flashed on the courtroom screens. One key prosecution witness was the medical examiner himself, Dr. Kevin Horn, who walked the jury through Travis's injuries. Dr. Horn noted the cluster of defensive cuts on Travis's hands, suggesting Travis had tried to grab the knife or shield himself. The doctor's testimony also shut down a potential defense theory about the shooting. He stated that in his expert opinion, the gunshot likely came last, after Travis was already incapacitated or dead. This was critical. Some of the most compelling prosecution testimony came from Ryan Burns, the man that Jodi visited right after the killing. Burns described how Jodi arrived looking different with her dark-dyed hair and acted completely nonchalant on June 5th, flirting and cuddling with him. He also relayed Jodi's explanation for her bandaged hands, the supposed glass that was broken at a non-existent restaurant, which cast doubt on her credibility immediately. Martinez then introduced evidence of the gas cans and phone records. A gas station clerk from California confirmed Jodi's gas purchases and odd multiple gas can fill-ups. Detective Flores explained how Jodi's cell phone had suspiciously fallen silent during the window of time during the murder. All these details supported the prosecution's assertion that Jodi meticulously planned the trip to kill Travis and cover up her tracks. This is a clear picture of premeditation. By January 17, 2013, the prosecution rested its case, having drawn a devastating outline of premeditated murder. The following month, it was time for the defense's case, and it began with an extraordinarily bold move. Jodi Arias herself took the witness stand. On January 4, 2013, to everyone's surprise, the 32-year-old defendant stood up and raised her hand to testify in her own defense. Jodi Arias would remain on the witness stand for 18 days, stretching into mid-March, undergoing direct examination by her attorney and then a brutal cross-examination by Martinez. Under gentle questioning from the defense counsel, Kirk Nurmi, Jodi Arias told her life story and gave her a version of her relationship with Travis. In excruciating detail, she described alleged abuse that she had suffered, starting with claims from her own parents and in her childhood. She recounted meeting Travis and the intense early romance, but then pivoted to portraying Travis as a controlling, sexually demanding partner who engaged in demeaning behavior. Jodi testified that Travis pressured her into sexual activities that conflicted with his public persona. At times, the testimony was salacious. The defense even played for the jury a phone sex recording between Jodi and Travis, in which Travis's voice could be heard indulging in his fantasies. For example, Travis was saying that he wanted to tie her to the tree, if you remember that from earlier. On the recording, Jodi responded in a compliant, flirtatious manner, though. The defense introduced this to show Travis's sexual aggression and Jodi's submissiveness, though it cut both ways. Some jurors might have seen Jodi as a willing participant rather than a victim. In a bombshell claim, Jodi also testified that one day she walked in on Travis pleasuring himself to an image of a young boy, accusing him of harboring those horrifying tendencies. She asserted that she kept this dark secret and even tried to help Travis overcome his urges, yet he would fly into a rage and shame her if she ever even tried to discuss it with him. It was one of the most contentious allegations of the trial. Travis was not alive to defend himself, and his family and friends said that this could not be further from the truth. Many observers felt Jodi was assassinating Travis's character to save her own life. When it came to describing the day of the killing, Jodi finally gave the account that would serve as her defense. She claimed that on that day, she acted in self-defense after enduring months of abuse. According to Jodi, she and Travis had spent that romantic day together, but in the late afternoon, an argument broke out while she was taking pictures of him in the shower. She testified that as she was snapping the pictures, she accidentally dropped Travis's brand new camera, causing him to erupt in anger. Jodi said Travis lunged out of the shower in a fury and body slammed her to the bathroom floor, enraged at the possibility of losing the camera's photos. Panicked and fearing for her life, Jodi claimed that she ran to Travis's closet and grabbed a gun that Travis owned. She pointed the .25 caliber at him to deter him, she said, but Travis, unafraid, charged at her like a linebacker. In Jodi's story, the gun went off accidentally, striking Travis but not stopping him. She then said that she tussled and she has no clear memory of what happened next, except that, in her words, quote, "He was trying to kill me, so I had to defend myself," end quote. Arias told the jury that the next thing she remembered was standing over Travis, whose bloodied body was on the floor, and dropping the knife in complete shock. She claimed to have no recollection of stabbing Travis at all. She said her mind went blank from trauma. In fact, a recurring phrase of hers on the stand was that she blacked out during the most violent moments, comparing her memory to foggy snapshots with no clear picture of the stabbing or throat slitting. She admitted to disposing of evidence afterward and lying repeatedly to law enforcement and friends, but attributed those lies to panic and shame. Once Jodi's attorney finished his direct examination, the trial entered Juan Martinez's cross-examination of Jodi. The prosecutor was unrelenting, as he should be. Over several days, Martinez dissected Jodi's timeline, pointing out how her, quote, foggy memory seemed to conveniently occur only at the crucial moment of actually killing him. Before and after, her memory was crystal clear, though. He confronted her with countless lies, reminding the jury that she had repeatedly said, quote, "I wasn't there," for months, then invented the intruder story, and now only settled on self-defense with the guidance of her attorneys. Martinez got Jodi to acknowledge that she never told a soul about Travis's alleged child harm or abuse until well after her arrest, suggesting that she fabricated these claims later to justify her actions. He highlighted the cold-blooded cover-up efforts with the gas cans and everything else as evidence of planning, not panic. One notable moment was when Martinez hammered Jodi about the sheer brutality of her attack versus her claim of self-defense. Quote, "Were you crying when you were shooting him? Were you crying when you were stabbing him?" He barked at her, saying these things, insinuating that her tears in court were for herself, not for Travis. Jodi remained relatively composed, but many courtroom observers felt that her extended time on the stand ultimately hurt her. Even the jury seemed skeptical. In Arizona, jurors are allowed to submit written questions to witnesses. The jurors asked Jodi over 150 questions, many of which were pointed and showed doubt, such as, quote, "Why should we believe you now?" end quote. Beyond Jodi's testimony, the defense also brought in expert witnesses to bolster the self-defense claim. Alice LaViolette, a psychotherapist and expert on domestic violence, took the stand to explain how a woman like Jodi could be a victim of intimate partner abuse. LaViolette testified that, in her opinion, Jodi had been abused by Travis, verbally, emotionally, and physically, and that Jodi exhibited many traits of a battered woman who was afraid and ashamed to tell anyone. She spoke about general patterns of domestic violence and suggested that Travis had a Jekyll and Hyde personality. Another defense expert, psychologist Dr. Richard Samuels, testified that he believed Jodi had developed acute PTSD and dissociative amnesia, which explained why she purportedly couldn't remember stabbing Travis. Dr. Samuels administered tests and claimed Jodi's responses were consistent with someone who had been through a traumatic event. Would we not categorize her murdering Travis as a traumatic event, though? My concern with this finding is that we would need to prove that she had PTSD prior to Travis's murder in order to support this theory. Prosecutor Martinez rigorously cross-examined the defense experts, too. To rebut the abuse claims, the prosecution put up its own expert, clinical psychologist Dr. Janine DeMarte. She felt that Jodi Arias did not suffer from PTSD or battered woman syndrome at all. Instead, Dr. DeMarte diagnosed Jodi with borderline personality disorder, suggesting Jodi had extreme fear of abandonment and could become violently emotional when she didn't get her way. This dueling expert testimony left jurors to decide which version they found more credible. Finally, on April 16, 2013, after about 4 months of testimony, the defense rested its case. Both sides had presented their arguments in the first week of May. Juan Martinez delivered a fiery closing argument, pacing and nearly shouting as he described Jodi as a manipulative, cold-blooded liar who meticulously planned Travis's murder. He walked jurors through the evidence of premeditation: the stolen gun, the gas cans, the turned-off cell phone, arguing that Jodi's actions were not those of a terrified victim, but of a deliberate killer covering her tracks. He reminded them of the cruelty of the attack: nearly 30 stab wounds, a slashed throat, a gunshot, all at the hands of Jodi Arias. That part was not up for debate. Martinez suggested that Jodi attacked Travis in a jealous rage, possibly sparked by Travis's plans to take another woman on that upcoming trip to Cancun, or maybe even an argument that day. In contrast, defense attorney Kirk Nurmi, in his closing, tried to bring the temperature down. He acknowledged Jodi had lied and made mistakes, but urged the jury to set aside personal aversion for her and objectively consider her claim of self-defense. Nurmi argued that if Travis had truly been as gentle and wonderful as the prosecution was claiming, why would he have a double life? He suggested that Travis's anger and hypocrisy drove Jodi to a fight-or-flight response. Nurmi's final plea for the jurors was to see reasonable doubt in this case, and if so, then she needs to be acquitted. On May 3, 2013, the case went to the jury. After about 15 total hours of deliberation spread over 4 days, the jury reached a verdict. On May 8, 2013, Jodi Arias was found guilty of first-degree murder in the death of Travis Alexander. As the court clerk read the verdict, Jodi Arias, who had notoriously claimed no jury would ever convict her, stood motionless. She blinked hard and fought back emotion but did not break down. Travis's family members, seated in the front row wearing blue ribbons in his memory, gasped and then cried in relief and joy. Outside, a crowd of onlookers cheered and yelled, and they were screaming justice for Travis. The jury's verdict was unanimous that Jodi was guilty of murder in the first degree, but the type was split. 5 jurors found it premeditated, and 7 jurors found it both premeditated and felony murder. Regardless, though, the end result was the same. Jodi Arias was now a convicted murderer, eligible for the harshest of penalties under Arizona law. With the guilty verdict rendered, the trial entered a new stage to determine Jodi Arias' punishment. Because prosecutors had pursued this as a capital case, the very same jury now had to decide whether to sentence Arias to death or to life in prison. The day after the conviction on May 9, 2013, the court began the aggravation phase. Prosecutor Juan Martinez's goal here was to prove one statutory aggravating factor: that the murder of Travis Alexander was committed in, quote, an especially cruel or heinous manner, end quote. On May 15, 2013, the jury unanimously agreed with the prosecution. They found the murder exceptionally cruel, establishing the aggravating factor needed to make Arias eligible for the death penalty. Jodi cried quietly at this decision, as it meant that her life truly was on the line now. Next came the penalty phase, essentially a mini trial about whether Jodi's life should be spared or not, and it began on May 16, 2013. The prosecution's stance was that the heinousness of the crime and Jodi's lack of remorse warranted execution. The defense, now led in this phase by Jodi's other attorney, Jennifer Wilmot, argued that Jodi's life still had value and should be spared due to mitigating factors such as her lack of a criminal history, the abuse that she was alleging, and her potential for rehabilitation. In Arizona, the defendant is allowed to make a statement to the jury and even to call witnesses on their own behalf. However, in a surprising move, Jodi Arias did not beg for mercy. In fact, in an interview with a local Fox reporter just minutes after she was convicted, but before the penalty phase, Jodi stated on camera that she would prefer the death penalty over life in prison. With tears in her eyes, she said, quote, "I believe death is the ultimate freedom, so I'd rather just have my freedom as soon as I can get it," end quote. This astonishing interview, which was unauthorized by her attorneys, by the way, showed Jodi welcoming execution. Many saw it as another instance of her manipulative theatrics, possibly a way to get jurors to say, quote, "Fine, if she wants death, maybe we won't give it to her," end quote. Regardless, a few days later, Jodi reversed course. When it came time for her formal plea to the jury on May 21st, Jodi asked the jury to give her life in prison, not death. My guess is this probably came as guidance from her attorneys. In a statement on May 21st, Arias, now wearing glasses with a meek demeanor, said she had wanted to die, but changed her mind to avoid bringing any more pain to her family. She listed reasons for the jury to choose life. She promised to use her time in prison productively, mentioning that she could teach other inmates Spanish or American Sign Language or contribute by designing t-shirts for domestic violence awareness. She also said that she would donate her hair to cancer charities annually if allowed to live. Jodi somewhat expressed remorse by saying, quote, "I'm horrified because of what I did, and I wish there was a way that I could take it back," end quote. But many felt she stopped short of a full apology to Travis's family, and I agree. The Alexander siblings then gave powerful victim impact statements, describing through tears how Travis's murder and the trial had devastated their lives. Travis's younger sister Samantha told the jury that her brother's throat was cut so deeply that he was nearly decapitated, and she asked them to impose the harshest punishment possible. On May 23rd, the jury returned deadlocked. They could not reach a unanimous decision on life versus death. It was revealed that the jurors had split 8 in favor of death and 4 in favor of life, and after multiple attempts to deliberate further, they remained at an impasse. Maricopa County Judge Sherry Stevens had no choice but to declare a mistrial for the penalty phase. Tears and outbursts erupted in the courtroom. Travis's siblings sobbed in frustration after enduring the entire trial, and now they would have to endure more proceedings to finish the case. One female juror also cried and later said she felled Travis's family. The jurors were dismissed, but not before the judge told them that their verdict or lack thereof was not to be revealed publicly. By March 5th, 2015, the new jury also announced that they were hopelessly deadlocked. This time, the split was even more lopsided. 11 votes were for the death penalty, and 1 person held out for life. Some jurors later revealed their frustration. The majority even attempted to have the lone holdout juror removed, believing she had an agenda, but the judge found no misconduct and kept her on. Because a death sentence in Arizona requires a unanimous vote, the failure to reach agreement meant that the death penalty was automatically taken off the table. Judge Stevens formally declared a second mistrial in the sentencing phase on March 5, 2015. At last, on April 13, 2015, Judge Stevens rendered the final sentence that Jodi Arias would serve. The judge had only 2 options now: life in prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years, or life in prison with no possibility of parole. Travis's family argued for the latter, stressing that Jodi had shown no genuine remorse and that Travis's life was irreplaceable. The defense asked for the slim mercy of a parole possibility. The judge sided with Travis's family, though. She sentenced Jodi Arias to life in prison without any possibility of parole. In delivering the sentence, Judge Stevens said the extreme cruel nature of this crime justified that decision. Jodi, 34 years old at the time, gave a brief statement. She said she was sorry for the pain that she caused Travis's family and that she hoped Travis's siblings would someday find peace. In a monotone voice, Jodi said, quote, "To this day, I can't believe that I was capable of doing something that terrible. I'm truly disgusted and repulsed with myself," end quote. But she also added that she had wanted to avoid trial altogether by pleading guilty years earlier. With that, the years-long legal odyssey came to an end. Jodi Arias was remanded to Arizona Department of Corrections to spend the rest of her natural life behind bars. Although nothing could truly bring them peace, Travis Alexander's friends and family worked hard to ensure that he was remembered for his life, not just his death. They gave interviews to highlight Travis's generous, motivational personality and his tragic end at the hands of someone that he had once loved. After the verdict, one of Travis's sisters said, quote, "Travis can finally rest in peace." Public sentiment heavily sided with the Alexander family. Following her April 2015 sentencing, Jodi was then sent to the Arizona State Prison Complex Perryville, which is a large women's prison west of Phoenix in maximum security. Jodi Arias has exhausted all of her appeals. As of 2025, Jodi is now 44 years old and remains imprisoned. Her days consist of prison routines, counts, meals, work assignments, and limited recreation. Occasionally, tidbits about her surface in the media still. In a 2020 Lifetime documentary, 2 of Arias's former cellmates alleged that Jodi was manipulative in jail, claiming that she flirts with the guards and always seeks special treatment. They also recounted how Jodi never lost her touch for drama. One of them said, Jodi once joked about her own mugshot, saying, quote, "Just smile and say cheese," displaying a nonchalance about the seriousness of the situation she was in. Travis Alexander's family members have worked hard to move forward, though they still speak of struggling from all the grief and trauma because of the trial's graphic revelations. They did win a civil judgment ordering Arias to pay them more than $32,000 in restitution for funeral costs and travel expenses that the whole family incurred during the trial. This was only a fraction of what they requested, but at least it was something. Arias, of course, has no substantial assets, so it's just more symbolic than anything. The Alexander siblings have said no amount of money or even a death sentence could have made up for losing Travis, but they were satisfied that Arias will never walk free again. Travis Alexander's memory lives on with those who knew him. Travis was a positive, inspirational person who rose above his rough beginnings. It is an unspeakable tragedy for his life to have been cut this short, especially in this way. I believe that Jodi Arias is a manipulative, sociopathic woman and that she is exactly where she belongs. I pray that Travis is resting peacefully and that his family continues to persevere through their unimaginable grief. I know that this case was really heavy. Well, let's be honest, I know that they all are, but I want to thank you for spending time with me again this week. Please take extra great care of yourselves this week. Nurse's orders. See you next time. Bye.